Hi, I'm Selva Prabhakaran. In this one, let's understand why we divide the population variance by n-1. Instead of say dividing by n-0.5 or some other number, why do we divide by n-1? We are studying the average yield of coconut trees for the entire population of the coconut trees, right? We cannot go and measure every other tree out there. So what we do, we take a small sample of coconut trees. So we have the average yield of this small sample. From these sample values, we want to estimate the population's variance. So this is the context. Let's understand the reason now. So imagine an extraordinary case where we know the population mean. We wouldn't know this number, but let's assume that we know this number. Now given this, and we have drawn a sample of size 3. We have just 3 items in the sample, and we know the measurements as 12, 8 for the first 2 samples. Now can you guess what could be the value of this third sample? Can you guess? It can be any other number, right? So this particular sample is free to be any number it wants to be because we only know the population's mean, correct? Now let's take another case where we know the sample measurements. We know the sample mean to be 12, right? Instead of population mean in the previous case, we know the overall sample mean to be 12, and we have 3 items in the sample. Alright, and we know the first 2 measurements of the sample as 10 and 9. Now given this information, can you guess what would be the value of the third item here? This has to be 17. This number has to be 17. Why? That's because the sample mean is 12. We have lost 2 numbers here. So 12, if you subtract 12 from 10, you get minus 2. If you subtract 12 from 9, you get minus 3. So we have lost 3 values. So 12, and we need to make up for these 2 values. So this particular value should be 12 plus 5. So that would be 17, which means this observation, the third observation, is not free to take any value. It has to be 17. So what this means is the degrees of freedom for the previous case, all 3 values are free to be any value. Okay, so the degree of freedom was 3 in this case, whereas we have lost 1 degree of freedom in this case. So we have n-1 as the degrees of freedom when the sample mean is known. Does it make sense? So that is why when we estimate the population variance from sample, we lose 1 degree of freedom. That's why in the denominator of the formula for population's variance, instead of n, we have n-1. If you have more questions about this, please ask in the comments below.